928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Stumbling down the road with Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff as she carries stones, digs holes, and wheels her shovels on her way. This road is the real path. It is never easy and never clear, but always entertaining. This journey has not been a seated event, as Bridgette walks, runs, stumbles, carries, digs, drags, laughs, fights, sings, prays, dances, kicks, screams, and oftentimes falls.
Hey everybody, it's Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. There we go. We're good to go. Just want to check my volume. I'm your host, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. This is the Wednesday edition. Yes, I'm on 2 days. I am on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Saturdays I am on 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'm on Studio A on Revolution Radio. Hey everybody, so we're making the transition, and because our founder and operator and visionary of Revolution Radio passed away about a month ago. And so we've kind of been all over the map. Our management team has been doing a super good job with keeping us rolling. So if you've been listening to a lot of the technical issues and things that have been going on, just know that we are close, so close to getting everything back under control, and we're moving forward in a unified way. So, please stay with us. Please keep supporting us. You can go to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, and you can click the support button, support us, and find all kinds of amazing ways to support our network. I support it with monthly advertising. I have an advertising banner, Healthcare by Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. And there are heirloom seeds, there are heirloom storage seeds, for long periods of time, or you can just, donate, which would be even better. $1 here and there, $10 here and there. And our new manager, the top of our food chain these days, a mad painter, he is offering a free ebook for people who donate $10 or more to the station, and you can just go on Support Us and look for the donate button. And he said to make sure that you put ebook in the message line so that he knows that he needs to send you an ebook. So yeah, $10 or more, because we really have to drive some money. So now that we're taking it over, we have to start, being able to pay for our servers and everything else that we need to keep it going, rocking and a rolling. All right. So also, while you're at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, you can actually also go to the schedule link and click on that. And that's kind of how you find out about Studio A or Studio B, and you have a choice. Click on Studio A, and then if you scroll down, you can see all the different people, the hosts, and all the different shows that we have on Studio A, and scroll down to the bee with the flower. And that's my show. Click that picture, and it'll take you to a back page and has some information about the show, me, links, and contact information if you want to give me an email. All right. So anyway, this morning, I have Kelsey Sweet on. And Kelsey is a friend of mine, and we've done a little bit of collaboration here in Reno, Nevada in the past. And then Kelsey now has her own radio show on Revolution Radio on Wednesday mornings at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 8 a.m. Is that right, Kelsey?
Yep. Dark and early in the morning, now that it's nice and cold outside.
Okay, so tell us what your show is and what it is about.
Thank you to you and your inspiration and connecting me to this and my voice. It's, I call it Cultivating Consciousness, and it's become a platform for me to explore some of my research through some PhD studies, and I feel like I got kind of suckered into the academic system, and so I'm kind of stuck playing the role in terms of trying to make sense out of the things that I do. And so I'm like trying to learn how to apply things that are consciousness, because it's such a new topic. And as a visual artist and a psychologist, it's an interesting platform, I guess, that I hope will allow me the time and space to be able to connect with people, to have these deeper conversations about stuff.
Awesome. Okay, so what's your show about, though? Like, what's your... Well, because on, Facebook, when you put it out there, you call it the afternoon meditation.
I've got I use a lot of hashtags in some of my posts. So I've got a hashtag for afternoon meditation, a hashtag morning meditation, hashtag evening meditation, hashtag midnight meditation. They just use when I'm up at these hours and reflecting. And so it's 6 a.m. for the East Coast time, but for us, or for me, you and I here in Reno, it's 3 a.m. our time. So it's a space for me to meditate and to practice channeling energy. So it's a space for me to cultivate consciousness and try to explore what that is and try to understand what that is, because it is such a vague topic. So I get into things like energetics, artwork. We talked about healing arts this morning a little bit, and art therapies. We've talked about the chakras, color psychology, and how these different aspects of mind, body, spirit, healing, new age thoughts in terms of ascension apply to the realm of science, and trying to explore the empirical side behind it. So
I love Axe. He's in the back. He's having a fun time. La la la. He's chatting up a storm back there.
It's been fun because he's been somewhat involved in the mornings. He tries not to wake up, and I try not to wake him up too, but he's exploring his voice as well. So he's a part of that too. But it's been neat to have the live feedback and to be able to connect into this group of people, and my experiences of it since I've been involved, because I've been involved, I think, the week before the head guy passed away. And so I just had these very strange synchronistic experience with this. And I feel like I'm just very open to what can possibly unfold in terms of cultivating consciousness. Like I said, it's going along with my research. So as I'm trying to formulate what that's supposed to be and what my dissertation is supposed to be and what my business model and job roles are supposed to be, it's this fluid space, or this space where I get to bridge the gaps and then luckily enough for me, I get you, Bridgette, to be my bridge and my guide through the space too, to help me make sense of it.
Well, I don't have all the answers. I'm work in progress as well, for sure. Well, anyway, we were talking this morning about, and I just want to tell people out there that, I mean, sometimes I think I come across like I'm not spiritual at all, and I might be some kind of atheist, but that's not true. I'm heavily been practicing shamanism my entire life, and it's kind of like the foundation of everything about me, and it has led me into working with a lot of indigenous people and native people and medicine people and shamanism type people, and you could even call it, like, a modern word for it would be like the Red Road, but it has so many branches, I think, and on the path. But one of the things is, early on, I grew up in a family that was like extremely heavily spiritualized, I guess. And all the women in my family on my mom's side, came from a bloodline. And even though the history of my great-grandmother was sort of kind of where she came from before she met my great-grandfather, was kind of erased. And there was, kind of a family member in my family that, when my great-grandmother died, kind of actively played a role in the cleanup of any kind of information that my great-grandmother would have left behind. And my great-grandmother, I believe without a shadow of a doubt, was Native. And I wish I could figure out, exactly where she came from. And, there's some pretty big indications about that, and why I believe that, and why I'm researching that. And so then I also grew up, with all of their abilities and how they communicated with each other. And, I grew up like, Bigfoot and all this other stuff was completely normal, like the ETs, just all of it was completely normal. I mean, my family would have large conversations about these kinds of things when we would get together and go camping and hunting and fishing and things like that when I was a little girl. And you'd hear, the adults talking to, 6 a.m. in the morning, camping about, the stars and astrology and the extraterrestrials, and looking for, ETs in the sky, and the Bigfoots and the vampires, and, all the different things that are collectively in this reality. So I also went on to, work with my great-grandmother, who taught me a lot of unbelievable, healing skills until I was about 8, when she went into the home, and there's a whole story behind that, but she continued to do spiritual work while she was there, and a lot of singing, and talking in, a native based language that I didn't understand. And then later on, found my way. And I read a lot of, I grew up in a family where I was allowed to explore, I guess, spirituality or other people's ideas, or I was allowed to find my own way, even though my grandmother moved the family kind of into Pentecost, which is a whole other radical, if anybody's ever been involved with Pentecost, it is radical spiritual, stuff. So then, later on, I started finding other teachers and studying with them. And my first big teacher when I was 23 was a Lakota Sioux, a medicine woman who is out of this world. Never met her, and my great-grandmother are probably the two most powerful people I've ever actually witnessed in this world, of their abilities. So I just want people to know, like, I worked in groups, in my early 20s where we would get together and we would work on energetic grids around the planet. We would do all kinds of different things. And I was really young, and all these women and people in these different groups were, quite a bit older. And they all kind of came from different backgrounds, but we would get together and work together to try to change everything energetically that was going on this planet. I also did a lot of work where, out of the closet, up until I started actually working on people and making a living at a lot of the stuff that I do. People would come to me for information or advice about things. So not that I'm not really consider myself a medium. I just tap into a lot of the energies and I find out what the story is, right? What the story was, what it is, and what's going on, and then help people to, transform that into something else energetically, which can heal, pretty much on any level. But anyway, so when I'm going to jump into this conversation about where I'm headed, I want people to know that I've, in my early teens, I was reading Carlo Castaneda. I was reading all of the Seth books, Jane Roberts. I was reading, Lynn Andrews. I was reading anything that I could get my hands on, on my personal time outside of school. So I was always out there, always out there. I'm sure that if you talk to people who went to school with me when I was young, even probably in high school, they will probably call me something like fruitcake. probably some terms like that. So when I talk about like the new age, this ascension consciousness, there are a lot of things in it that I see that are very, happened in the past. A lot of these people don't realize like some of the stuff that's involved, like, Burning Man, that we get a lot of that kind of influence in the Reno area these days. It's a Dionysus festival, right? That was actually eventually stopped. It was a pagan festival. It was eventually stopped, and the church, the Catholic Church kind of stepped in to get rid of the Dionysus because it was very hedonistic, just like Burning Man. And they drank and did drugs, and there was art, and, because Dionysus was a partier. He was a merry old goat. He could shapeshift into goat. It's where the first Pan comes from, where we see where the first devil starts to appear in history. So, all these people,
all the fire and ritual and
yeah. And the thing is, I saw this really cool documentary the other night about that they called it the Wicker Man, and it was during the maybe it is the Celts or the Druids. I can't remember the ones that I guess like to paint themselves like maybe blue. That's kind of like how we see that in our modern history. We see a lot of that, but it was like really horrifying. It was during the Roman period, and when the Romans were coming in and like kind of slaughtering the people, but they would build this huge wicker, humanoidy structure. And then they would put human and animal sacrifices in it. So they would build it up. It was really tall, actually. And then they would fill it up with people and animals, and then alive. And then they would pack it full of straw. And then they would light it on fire.
That's pretty wild. It sounds a lot like Burning Man, for sure.
Yeah, well, but, think about how that Burning Man thing is activating something that's already in the collective. So it's like kind of
intentional.
Yeah.
Especially within, like, the temple has always fascinated me on the Sundays when they burn it down, because it's such a shift in the energy. So there's more prayer and it's more peaceful and more quiet, but it's definitely affected, I think, like our culture here in Reno very, very differently. And it's bizarre to watch it because it's on like almost 30 years or so of its growth and development, as much as it's been burning down. But
yeah, well, the thing is like it's activating so many things in the past history, like ritualized why. So what it does every time you activate, so it's like okay, so put it out there in these terms. I just want people to know when I'm talking about a lot of this stuff, I'm not trying to doom and gloom ascension people and consciousness, but people are relatively checked out because they're, you may think you're conscious and you're participating in some of this stuff and you're actually activating, magic and death and a lot of other crazy things because you're doing things that are similar to what was happened in the past. So you're actually reactivating that energy, which
and this area
positive.
Is like there's so much native energy that its location out in the desert and the grid and the pattern that it creates. I see how it can definitely influence those structures energetically.
Well, and think about how many people are like on all kinds of drugs that they're not even like, attached to this reality. They're opening doorways. And so then those people are used by energies that, want to piggyback and keep, building and are attracted to those kinds of energies, which are not, not good. It's not good. Like learned early on that if you're going to be doing any kind of dreaming medicine, we'll talk about even mugwort can be used, in a, ingest, all kinds of different stuff, peyote, datura, ayahuasca, DMT, lots of these kinds of things. And if you don't have somebody who's watching you, who is practitioner of this medicine,
Right.
and is responsible for that medicine and prays over it and takes care of it and grows it and all these, other factors, and also have a genetic predisposition for this type of medicine work, you can get yourself in all kinds of crazy trouble. I get lots of calls about people who have gone places they shouldn't have gone by themselves and were given medicines, and they have some serious, trouble with beings that have come back with them. And so you just got to be really, really careful about what you're activating. But I think, like if you're, this wicker man that comes from the Druid period, I don't know, the Celtic period, and had all these sacrifices of animals. So anything you build that's like woody or barky or hay-y, like some kind of, humanoid structure that you could build anywhere in the world, and you put that up and you burn it. Well, those energies come together. Those beings that are in another dimension or working in different dimensions that are connected here, see that going on, and that's going to reactivate a lot of the bloodshed and sacrifice and murder that took place before. And so activation, well, let's see. I was going to give like a really good idea about what activation is. Well, anyway, it's plugging things into
like about artwork and artwork being like a prayer or artwork holding intention. And when it's something like Burning Man and you're creating these artworks and these structures, and some of them are animals, some of them are plant-like, some of them are these hybrids, right, of different sort of technical things, but it's still carrying that intention. So
yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, I think that there's always an intention of what's good or bad, but like attracts like in our world, right? So that's supposedly one of the, rules, one of the energetic rules. So, in the past, there would have been the Dionysus festival, right? So now we have Burning Man, which is identical to Dionysus festival. So like attracts like, right?
Right.
And then these things from the past can piggyback on the present moment. And this is the other part is that people like this Wicker Man, from older than 2,000 years ago that they did, put all these, people and children and animals and stacked them all up and then, lit the whole thing on fire. So now you have, something like a Burning Man, in a desert that is reactivating a lot of that kind of energy during that time period. And the thing is, I don't think that people realize consciously, all these people who think they're conscious, about what they're doing and what they're participating in, and that they are reactivating, harsh dark, murderous, violent energies.
A lot of them too, because I don't know if anybody hasn't been to Burning Man. I don't know that a lot of people really recognize the scale of it, because there's like 70 to 100,000 people that migrate to the area, like in the middle of the desert, and it ties for like the third largest city in Nevada while it's there for like a month or two. It's just bizarre.
Yeah. So
all around the world.
Yeah, so when I get down on people, this ascension, new age, all this kind of stuff, I don't, I've read a lot about lots of different kinds of spirituality, and I always, I've dabbled in some stuff in my past, but I always come back to the path that I'm on, and on that path, we don't, shamanism, the red road, whatever you want to call it, we just don't dabble in other things. So I don't dabble in a lot of this other type of energetic stuff, because I'm super aware that I don't want to be activating anything haphazardly, and unconsciously, and so I don't want people to think like I'm getting all down on it, but I don't really believe in ascension. And a lot of the new age stuff is old age stuff, but they're actually, and the part about consciousness is that people are just deciding to be haphazardly conscious, but they don't really understand, which kind of means more check out.
Like a dissociation almost.
Yeah, live in communities and check out and not really do any work, but maybe just, do drugs and whatever else, and kind of be out there in your own world on a community, not really working, kind of not really, growing food, not really doing anything, not really participating as a full-scale community that is 100% sustainable, which could very well easily happen. But a lot of these people are just completely, and totally checked out and think that they're conscious. And so anything that you talk about that, there's a history, there's information, there's methods, there's technology, there's all these different kinds of components that, you can educate yourself on to actually participate and really build consciousness. Mostly, I just,
experiential in a way.
Yeah, so I look at a lot of the new age and ascension stuff as activating old stuff, which is not helping the planet change or the energy structures change, because a lot of that was tied into manipulation, control, murder, it's
cultish.
Power struggles. And so we're activating a lot of that stuff consciously, supposedly, in our modern world, which is consciously going against changing those energies and moving forward. So I have a hard time sometimes, I guess, being nice and compassionate for all these people who consider themselves conscious but are not really that conscious, because they're not doing it. They're not actually, there's no action behind it. And in the path that I walk, it's very action oriented, which ties into, all the dimensions and spiritual stuff and activating different types of energies, but really from a place of understanding. Like I don't do any kind of ceremonial work or even personal practices that I haven't studied for a while or haven't really thought about for a long period of time of how I want to activate the energy. And especially if I go in and do, I haven't done these for a really long time, but I was doing medical fires. So they were ceremonial based. And then there was like a whole activation and it's, it'd take a couple days to actually, get the area cleaned. Anybody could show up to help me that wanted to. I would teach them things, skills and tools and techniques on these types of medicinal fires, working with Groundfather. and as a way to, you know, heal yourself on any level. And then, you know, set the stage and get it all together and have all the medicines out and explain to people, you know, how things were going to go, what I expected from them, what we're trying to do together. The big one was that, you know, I had rules about how you approach the fire, how you work with the fire, and, you know, helping people with different kinds of medicines that you would bring, you know, to that fire work, and how you honor it and respect it and honor and respect yourself and the other people. So, you know, whenever I would have somebody, it was always, you know, I worked with a Native teacher for a couple of years, and I'd end up going to try to be like an attendant for him. So when he was teaching and everything else like that, you know, I might drive him there. If we're there for a couple of days, make sure he had a tent and a sleeping bag, you know, get him all set up. And then, you know, when he needed me to run, you know, to collect certain medicines or different things, you know, I would take care of that for him. So he could continue talking to the group and doing the work that he needed to do. If he wanted to do a lodge on the spot, then, you know, we would take care of that. And get the lodge up and going, like a sweat lodge, so he could do the work because that's what he felt like needed to happen next. So, because of that type of work and the work that I did, you know, like around the fire, you know, we would have people that would come that would do things that were completely inappropriate, and so we would. You know, part of the foundation is making sure that everybody's paying attention, and that and that it's explained and it's taught. So, if somebody did something totally inappropriate, we would have to absorb that energy because we didn't communicate to them how things need to happen. But periodically, you'd still have people that would show up that would. Do things even though you asked them not to do things, because they would show up to some of these ceremonies like a little smashed.
It's alchemizing, yeah. And it's
yeah.
Some just weird entities and energies and
yeah. I mean, I have a friend of mine, this is kind of a story about how this happens, and so I call them the granolas. So the granolas, you know, with the long dreadlocks and everything else, and they like to rasta, you know. And so a friend of mine, they were doing peyote ceremonies out at one of the Paiute reservations every Sunday out south of town. And I was living out south of town because I was caretaking over the winter a lodge area, and I was living in the building. And so my job, you know, I needed a place to kind of mellow out and sleep for the winter. And so it was like a perfect thing for me. I didn't have to go in town. I didn't have to be around people. And I would take down the lodge, doing it by the medicine persons, you know, exactly how they wanted it. And then when the ceremony was going to happen, then, you know, the people would come and they would put together the lodge. And then after the ceremony, I would take the lodge down, doing it in the ceremonial ways and putting it all out. And, you know, so it was kind of like chopping wood and carrying water while I had like 4 or 5 months of sleep, which was a really good period for me. And so up above us was the place where they were doing the Paiutes were doing the peyote ceremonies, which, you know, they have a roadman. The roadman is the man who goes to like Texas and collects the peyote that's being grown by the native people in the old spiritual ways. So, you know, it's planted, it's cultivated, it's taken care of. They drum, they sing, they pray on it. They pray to collect it. They pray on it to, you know, dry it and take care of it. And then, you know, then they pray it to the roadman. The roadman goes through the ceremonies, and then the roadman takes it, and then he goes to different places. And so, you know, to a lot of, not all Indigenous people, but the peyote is kind of like Sunday service church. So, and you go, and there's a lot of healing, you know, big healing that takes place. Anyway, so the Paiutes opened it up, you know, to the white people. And then they ended up closing it down, that the white people couldn't come because these granolas were showing up. And so, the Paiutes, really bad things happened to the Paiute people from the white people and the white militaries and things like that. I mean, atrocious, unbelievable, horrible things. And so I understand that the Paiutes don't trust white people, and they are still not healed. And there's a lot of really horrible wounds. And so when they do open things up to white people, I'm white, and they want to, teach us, they're putting a lot of trust out there for these kinds of things to happen. And then when people are unconscious about what they're doing and they renege on the initial contract of, trust and honor and respect for yourself and others, then there's going to be a huge problem. But my Native friend was telling me, I call him the young medicine man, but he's like half Washoe, half Paiute, and he's trained in ceremonial ways. And anyway, so he was telling me about this one peyote ceremony that took place where these people came in, the granolas, a group of them. There was like 5 or 6 guys who kind of were granola, dreadlock guys, and that were heavy stoners, smoked a lot of weed. And so one of the things that, they told them early on is that weed is not compatible with the peyote spirit, right? Weed has its own spirit. The peyote spirit has a different spirit, and they have different altars and different, medicines, and they don't mix. They're not a good mix. They're not good being friends. You either need to take one or the other. And so they said, so if you want to come up to the peyote ceremony and attend, we ask that you are sober, for 3 weeks before you do the ceremony, like sober. And then we ask that you stay sober for 3 weeks after the ceremony. And because, if you start mixing these medicines, you're opening up different portholes and different worlds with each one of them. And then it gets complicated. And then the spirits kind of overlap, and, there's all kinds of crazy things that can happen, and it could make you sick. There's a reason why that these things are asked, that these things are also honored and respected. And you can hurt the group because you're doing these medicines collectively. So whatever you're doing also could harm other people in the group as well. And so anyway, so they, they don't adhere to, the honor and respect and the rules, and they show up to the peyote ceremony. They're given the peyote. They're doing the songs. Traditionally, there's multiple rounds of songs for different energies and activations of energies and prayers. And so at one point, these guys are super just, hammered, not only on, peyote, but they, have taken other stuff before they came. And so the lead man asked them, do you have a song? And the one guy was like a kind of a smart ass. And, here you are in this, magical healing ceremony, and, you are not conscious at all, even though you think you're so conscious and so far beyond whatever's being offered to you. And so he said, yeah, I've got a song. And mind you, everybody's like out there in peyote land while this is going on. And literally, like when I heard this, like I couldn't say anything for days. And the guy starts to sing this song, 1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indians, like, at this ceremony. And was so unbelievably racist, disrespectful, dishonored the people and the medicine and the land, dishonored himself, and overall put a sickness on, the ceremony.
It's I've learned recently in terms of consciousness about Rupert Sheldrake's idea of the morphic resonance field, which I think is this idea that you're talking about where ideas or experiences or thoughts that we have are carried through this morphic field or whatever this resonance field is, so that traumas occur collectively and those ideas are shared. Or if you have a grand idea, that idea might pop up somewhere else. So that it makes a lot of sense, and it brings in all these unwanted things. And if it's complex, it's really complicated.
Yeah, that's the one thing in shamanism, is that it's all about your intention and your ability to hold your attention in that intention for long periods of time.
That makes sense. And I feel like, especially with the culty idea, people are looking for the leaders or somebody to show them or tell them, or that easy way out, or they think that by just dissociating, there's like the confusion that it's equivalent to that spiritual connection. It's just not.
Well, they're looking also too, for answers and stuff like that, and somebody to lead them or teach them, but at the same time, they're disobedient and they're disrespectful and they dishonor, their teachers,
Where it comes from within, right? Or having to look within to heal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, to heal the land. Well, I think it's fascinating too, because you were talking about at the beginning of the show where your roots are from and how you've come to the knowledge and the skills that you have and the practice that you do. And I have a somewhat similar background in terms of not knowing exactly where I come from and not knowing really how I got here. The difference, I think, between my family is there's that disconnection between spirituality and the material world. It's like it's this thing that exists, or it's like that idea, and I could explore and define spirituality for myself, but it's something that isn't talked about, and that magical aspect isn't talked about. It's like being turned off for so many generations, or having that connection suppressed for so long that it doesn't make sense, I guess, sometimes in connecting to it. Or when it comes to self-healing and opening to the history of it, like I'm always curious to know how our work healing ourselves also heals the family, and then how we navigate all that information in real time. But it's definitely helped me to understand, or at least try to make sense of consciousness as a topic, I guess, or like how the things we do and say, or like as an artist, the things that we create. I feel like I'm this branch of a tree in this creative space. But if we create things that have that impact on people, then ultimately they can heal or they can destroy. But if people are coming from this space of ego, like so many people are so tuned out to that reality of self-work. They all, I don't know, like I think people are afraid, right? And it's just it's that connection between fear and love, or I don't know.
Well, I think fear is like, when I work on people, one thing that I've noticed is that you have the anger, right? That's the first thing that you bump up against, which most people don't get past that. And then right behind that, the next layer is the guilt and shame, right? So the anger hides that, our own personal guilt and shame. So we never really get there because we bump up against that anger and we instantly go, oh, I can't do that. So I'm going to drink, I'm going to do drugs, I'm going to do drumming ecstasy, whatever the heck, that I'm going to go shopping, I'm going to eat a Big Mac, in order to buffer that anger. And because they can't ever deal with the personal responsibility part of the healing, which is dealing with their guilt and shame, which is a personal path. And it's a non-blaming path. And then behind all that is the fear.
I really like Brene Brown's work on vulnerability and shame too. And I think it's interesting that like within the morphic resonance field now that people are beginning to talk about these aspects of vulnerability and authenticity. It's interesting. I think it definitely takes a level of being able to be objective versus dissociating, where you can step outside of yourself, but being able to step back in, right, where it's not, you're not trying to escape from anything. It's more like a confrontation maybe, or I guess bringing light to the things that need to be worked on. If there's if there's something that's toxic that needs to be healed and you don't address it, and you don't address it for what it is, or you try to code it or describe it as something that it's not, then it's like what you're saying with all this other stuff too, that the healing doesn't occur. It just creates more problems.
Yeah. And the other thing too is one of my teachers, a lot of my teachers that I've had, especially my native teachers, they talk about, especially my last one, Bavado, who passed in June 2016, but a lot of the work that we worked on constantly, me personally, with him, was being in balance. And so the very, even though he would be described as a medicine man, a Shoshone elder, he also understood, energy. And if you think about it, they say that if you hit the perfect frequency, it can actually spontaneously heal you. You can spontaneously wake up and have, deep consciousness, or it can flat out kill you, like in seconds, right? It can just fry you and kill you. And I think that's, both parts of all the energy fields that we're dealing with. And one of the things in the shamanism...
The 5G too? Do you think the 5G plays into some of that?
Yeah, I think wait till it gets flipped on. I hope we're going to defeat it. I mean, they're building it all, but it hasn't been flipped on yet. We're still dealing with a lot of the 4G stuff because they haven't really flipped it on all the way. But it's said to go faster than thought. So, and because of all the chemtrail spraying, we are fully full of metal and nanoparticles. And so all we need is like a 5G to flip on, and then we're transhuman. We will be controlled because those, 5G things will replace our mind, will put thoughts in our head, will control us. And we're the antenna because we've been metally, amplified.
Like robots from the inside out, robotic, not just like blood, but robotic at the cellular level.
Yeah, and it'll kill.
Kinesis, so you could rip somebody's cells apart.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they want it that way. I think they want us more dumbed down like cattle and controlled to do what they want us to do, like work for free or, who knows? Who knows? They're crazy. But one of the things that I've learned is like being in balance, and in shamanism we're taught a lot of that. And so I don't want people to get the wrong idea here, but we do have one foot in the darkness and one foot in the light, if you want to call it that, and bridging worlds. In shamanism, we're bridging energies and fields, so that we're not, like, people want to say that we're in the 3D here. We're not in a 3D. We're in a 2D, because it's always about the saint and the sinner. It's about you're spiritual or you're an atheist, and all these other things, in the light and the dark. And so what happens is
trifecta, like the mind, body, spirit, there's an aspect or like a leg of it missing. There's not the stool that can stand.
Yeah, I mean, and you got the spirit and the body. You have the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. You have 2 feet. You have 2 eyes. I mean, everything about this reality is a 2. And it's a polarity and duality, right? So, but in order to bring in like the unified part of it, to unify it all, you have to have one foot in either side, and you can't become imbalanced. And it's a very difficult thing, to look at everything neutrally and observe it all while you're standing on both sides. And, I may use some of the energies or the medicines that people may consider darker. I don't do any ritual sacrificing. I don't do bloodshed. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being in that energy field and needing to find out the information and the data that's contained, so that you can find solutions and resolutions and
empathy development in that as well, because you understand what it's like to go through something traumatic and go through something.
Yeah, you know what? I've come to this revelation about my empathy parts, and it actually shocked me at what I was manifesting and creating from it. Now, because it doesn't really make me a better human, it doesn't really make me more conscious to have empathy. And so what I learned about it was that empathy is what we do is when we feel empathy for somebody else is because we have a wound, right? And so usually the empathy problem is that we already have this weird internal wound, whether we know about it or not. And Carolyn Meese used to call it woundology, that we bond from woundedness, from these wounds, and that it was pretty, ignorant, actually, and silly and stupid. And this would carry on disease, through our life. She was like she's a medical intuitive, really unbelievably brilliant. And so I'm realizing, in the last couple weeks, like this whole empathy thing, and that, it's a strong suit in New Age, ascension consciousness. But the thing is what we're picking up is the need, that need in another person that is the same need that we may have, because like attracts like, and you're going to get more of what you're attracting. And so it's about the need. Well, what is need? Need is poverty consciousness. It's lack. It's, lack. And so it leads to poverty consciousness. And so, in the last 2 weeks, I've been really thinking about how that the empathy is based on some kind of need or wound that I have that I may not be totally conscious of, because I can have empathy about animals being hurt or wounded, but I see, people on a battlefield, military people, and I don't have a lot of empathy for that, because for me, it's like I don't have a relationship with military. I wasn't in the military, so I don't have any consciousness, kind of around that I could have an empathy wound. I could empathize with that. But there's this need. So it's like my empathy leads me. And so I'm starting to also see it how it's been played out in my healing work when I go out and I work on people and fix people and animals, and how I'll go straight to the need, the like attracts like in me with them, the need, the empathy, which I'm picking out what they need so that I know what they need before they need it. And then I'm trying to give that to them or help them with that when it's all based in need, which is lack. You're lacking something, right? You don't have something, and it's based on some story that you have inside of yourself that your mind is playing out, whether you know it or not. So then I started to go, oh my God, like this is like the, like attracts like, this is like totally poverty consciousness. Right? Because it's need and lack. So it's like my empathy is attracting more need, more people with need, more lack personally, more lack, people with lack. And it's also, activating the whole poverty consciousness, which there's a lack of everything. So I started really...
homeless people there are.
Huh?
Look how many homeless people there are and all the things that are going on in Southern California. It's like the collective lack.
Right. But I could help them, with not having the wound or the need myself. And then by helping them by not being in the empathy, right, from the negative side of it, and being kind of in the observer state and actually taking action, I can be more effective in helping them instead of helping them from a place of sorry or feeling sorry or, you know what I mean? Guilt and shame and, and fear and all these other things. So I can actively, if I, remind myself that my empathy is running rampant and out of control, like, a rabid dog, and rein that in and then stand in balance with everything and observe, right? And so I think it comes down to the other thing too, is that, you know, when you are trying to help someone or a friend or a family member, and you have these stories, these collective stories together, and you have all this empathy and it's all triggering your stuff and their stuff, think about what you're attracting and how long are you going to stay in those states of sorrow, you know, whatever those vibrations that and hormones. Because this is the other thing too, people don't understand in consciousness that you, through the act of feeling whatever you're feeling, you're conjuring your body to produce a peptide or a hormone that is going to go rampant through your whole body, and that energetically changes the air, the water, the environment, your interaction with people and animals. Animals can smell that stuff coming out of your skin like that, because the hormone, once it kicks into your body, produces also a smell. So consciously,
This morning.
yeah, you have the biological reflection of your consciousness. So you have to be careful. Oh, okay, so we're in commercial, sorry. I'll let Kelsey talk more when we come back. All right, Karen Stone's Digging Holes radio show. We're going to commercial. We'll be back at
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
Why am I here?
You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here.
You haven't answered my question.
The Matrix is older than you know. As you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation.
Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lassonde.
Collision Courses back. Schedule B on Revolution Radio every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You get outer space. You get honest answers, real researchers, truthful answers, and a place to engage with questions. Take part in the discussion. Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com hosts Collision Course every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
everybody. I think for the promos may be over. All right, we're back to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. And we're on the Wednesday edition of that. We're in the second hour. And Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You can go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and you can support us right now. Our head manager of Revolution Radio, I call him is offering a free ebook with $10 donation or more. And so basically, we are working on getting our donations, our support up. We have advertising banners, really affordable on our website, and that's how I support Revolution Radio. I pay for archives, and I know that our archives have been really funky lately, and it's because we're transitioning, and we need help to transition, so please do that. And while you're at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, please go to schedule and click on that, Studio A. That's where I always am on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And the Bee with a Flower, click on that back page, information about my show, and if you want to contact me. And yeah, it's all good. All right, so my guest for the second hour is the same as the first hour, which is Kelsey Sweet, who's a friend of mine. And I've been pretty chatty Cathy this morning about my belief systems. And so I'm going to let Kelsey talk maybe more in the second hour.
maybe more. I've been up since 2 a.m. and I'm running on coffee, so I always love where our conversations go.
All right, so tell people what your website and where to find you if they want to find you, and then also give us a PR about your show and when your show is and where to find it.
I am at kelseysweet.com. I've got my projects and portfolios and links to social media networks and things all consolidated onto that spot, I think. It's kind of a work in progress. My show's new. It's on Wednesdays as well. It's on at 6 a.m. 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., which is 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. my time. I call it Cultivating Consciousness. So we wake up on Wednesday mornings with the world and then try to put together different pieces of the mind, body, spirit connections to awaken people, right? To get them more conscious of what's going on, to do different exercises, tasks. I don't know, it's an exploration for me and channeling too, and improvisation and art, and I'm excited to explore it, so it's been a fun process.
So what studio are you in?
Studio A. Studio.
Awesome. Yeah.
.com.
Cool.
I'm working on it.
So I just wanted to add, from the last hour is that, just because you don't decide to ride the empathy wave and you choose, to hold a different type of attention and be kind of more in balance doesn't mean that you have to be mean or evil or that you can go kill things or whatever else. I'm not talking about going to the extreme, but I'm talking about, find yourself placed in the middle in between it all, maybe more of an observer and watching. And love to add, one of my favorite sayings comes from Hopi land, from a Hopi person, and that the fight, Bridgette, the fight outside of you will cease when the fight inside of you ceases. So, or the war outside of you will end. And that doesn't mean that everything is going to be hunky-dory in my outside world and I'm going to have the perfect mate and I'm going to be, rich and famous and all these. I laugh because those are not things that I'd be interested in. But the world outside can still be crazy and can still be doing what it's doing, but I'm going to be in balance and I'm not going to be lending it my feelings, which is feeding it one direction or another. And so being in balance, being neutral, not being triggered, not being hooked into things, and giving giving it your emotions. I'm not so worried that thoughts create things. I'm more worried about when that thought becomes a feeling, and then it becomes a chemical that's made in your brain, and then it goes through your entire body, and then it starts to create a frequency to your environment, which geometrically changes the structure and patterns of air and water and soil and the reality around you. And then also can become a smell. And so animals can pick up that smell and know exactly what kind of, chemistry that you're producing. So I tell people, you're the chemist, you're the chemist, or your body is the chemistry set, and you're the chemist. So, what do you actually want to create? And so you're going to have to try to arrange your feelings in a different way. So anyway, but I'm going to let Kelsey talk about something. What do you want to talk about?
I guess feelings and arranging feelings, because as an artist, I guess in different forms, and looking at the life, and especially with some of my personal life experiences of recently, it's a lot about navigating or expressing feelings, right? Or how do you get those feelings out and communicate those to others, and what's appropriate and what's not, and how do you have those conversations without judgment? And so it's I don't know, feelings are really touchy, right? Like, things are touchy-feely. And I think when we get to emotional things with people, that's where we get these things where people shut down, or they project, or they suppress, or there's just a misdirection of energy. And we were talking this morning about art being a creative process, right? Or like a healing process, and how you can use it to channel energy, or how you can use it to recover from things like trauma. And there's different means, right? Or different mediums and ways that people can do it. And when it comes to the self and having to, I think what you're talking about, Bridgette, here is leading by example, right? And if you're going to help people do the work, you have to at least have done some, if not all of the work, but the work is never done. And I think how we begin to talk about our feelings is really tricky, because this is where language comes into play, and where words are powerful and they carry intention. So if we, I guess, just sling different words around and aren't really conscious of how they play out energetically, we get the opposite reaction, right? If it's chemistry, then we don't get something that's creative or co-creative. Ultimately, it's destructive, even if it might look creative in the beginning. But I think as the artist, too, we kind of ride this wave in the middle, like what you're talking about. Or if we look back through our history, the shamans were the artists. They were the ones that had the abilities to connect in and channel, because they understood the power behind it. They understood the healing capacities and the destructive capacities. And in order to get to that point, somebody had told me, and I think this comes up in your story too, Bridgette, in terms of knowing the work and going through it, there's the initiation that a shaman has to go through, right? But it's often dark, and it's traumatic, or it's macabre in a different way. And we're taught in society through our words, right? Through the programming, the neuro-linguistic programming, how we use these words to meditate upon, or, this is a term used in hypnotherapy a lot, right? Where we encode these things, whether consciously or subconsciously, to direct emotion. And I don't know, there's a lot of stigma around it. And I think the stigma is internalized in our body into the stigmatizations and the cancers. And it's challenging, and it's hard to do the work. And it's like the self-reflection part of it, when you're confronted with the people and the vulnerabilities and opening up and wanting to connect with them. You can't make people want to heal. They have to come to you. in different ways. And I think that there are just strange coincidences often that lead us to our path if we're open to it. And I think that's kind of how I found mine, in just terms of learning things the hard way or having to challenge these different ideas. And at the time I didn't understand what was going on, and a lot of my pains and traumas were internalized. Or when I was told, all my problems are all my own fault at one point in my time, it's like, well, if I'm going to be objective about this and detach from it and not have the emotional responses and want to blame and attack or project or internalize, right? Well, then what does that mean? And my understandings of that come through these ideas of spirituality and connecting to the soul contracts, or having these agreements energetically through the collective to experience these traumas so that we can reach out and can connect to others and we can work to heal. But the language has to change, or the intention, perhaps the conscious intention has to change. And
I think the chemistry has to change. So we come back to the physical.
Yeah. And just how we've been polluted, right? Like what we're talking about with the chemtrails in our foods. Like, how many people don't even, aside from not even knowing how to make art or identify as a creative person, they don't know how to grow food. They can't wrap their heads around the concept of self-healing. That's not a concept we're taught. We're taught we have to go to this, this doctor or this professional, and they have to give us this pill, or this is the way that it's supposed to do because some aspect of modern science says so, or whatever that mind control is. And people don't want to see it. They're tuned out to it, and they like in these boxes because it's comfortable now, and they don't have to think.
Yeah. Well, and it boils down to I look at, if I'm working with people, I really look at how they deal with their physical world. I mean, when I work on people physically doing osteopath work and a lot of that type of work that I do, energy and structural medicine, I go to when I go to people's houses, I look at all of everything going on in their environment so I can figure out, what really are the issues and the problems. And so this summer, one of the things that I, spent a lot of time at the river with my dog, and we do lots of things. I'm collecting medicines and making tinctures and all kinds of different medicines from the plants down there, collecting them along the river, looking at the growth of the plants, when it's going to be time to collect them, what they have to collect, what time that's going to be, how big they need to be, what type of season. And being down there were, I have to tell people, Kelsey and I live in the same town, Reno, but we never see each other because we're both so unbelievably busy. So it's kind of funny because it's like, we kind of get, when she comes on my show, we get to connect and talk about things because we haven't been able to connect in real life, right?
That's great. Yeah. It's a nice way to be able to connect through the ethers and through the waves.
Yeah. So one of the things that I noticed was that there were all these rafters this summer on the river, and everybody had rafts, and everybody was drunk. Nobody was sober. And so here they come with the intention of, having a relationship with the water, which is not a good relationship, and that they're, have these plastic vessels that they've bought with these, ice chests and, being completely checked out, and it being like this party, which doesn't offer the water, like a higher vibration. And then during the course of them going down the rapids, they're, rafts blow up, they lose the ice chest, there's cans everywhere, their garbage is everywhere. And so I end up spending a lot of time as part of my shamanism path and my relationship to nature and the water, cleaning up their mess. So the people that go into the water, into the river, they don't have the connection to that, the element of the water, the relationship of the water to themselves, and then leaving all this trash behind in the river, like never even attempting to try to clean it up, just leaving it where it's at. And it just looks like it's like a massive explosion, like bombs go off in people's thongs and underwear and bras and cans and beer cans and Gatorade bottles and their, rafts and, their stereo speakers. You find all this stuff along the bank and in the water. And that is like, so unbelievably unconscious to me that you didn't even take the time to have enough respect. And people would call themselves, conscious. But consciousness is how you get into the water and you talking to the water, because, it is more powerful than we are. I mean, we can't live without water.
Our water here too is pretty neat. Like the Truckee River is such a fascinating river, and it's so tied into different native traditions. And if people aren't familiar with the area, our Truckee River connects Lake Tahoe to Pyramid Lake, both above and underground. Like there's this cycle, and there's all these different vortexes and different traditions. And there's the curse to the river, where I think I read somewhere online or something like that, where if a white man's baby is dipped in the water before 3 years old, it gets the locals curse, right? Where it's wrapped into all the destruction and the pain that's gone into the area here in Reno, and through the
blood
massacres and
the blood that's in the water, the bloodshed from the murder. Yeah, goes back to a lot of that. Hey, there's a book too that I've been reading. I usually have about 5 books on my nightstand in case anybody's interested. Well, it depends on what my mind wants to do. But right now I have 3 on my bedstand. I'm taking the agricultural study course with Rudolf Steiner, because I'm really big into Steiner work. And so I'm taking an 8-week course on that right now. So I've got the agricultural course. I've also got this killer book, Sagebrush Country, that has all the wildflowers, of the desert here. And so I can figure out next spring, all the plants I want to collect that are wild so that I can utilize their medicine. So I'm mapping that out, because flowering.
It's beautiful, and hiking around here, and a great experience.
There's a killer shaman book that I actually picked up that is called The Strong Eye of Shamanism, A Journey into the Caves of Consciousness by Robert E. Ryan. And I'm a quarter of the way into that one. I found it on a used book thing. And it's actually really well done for somebody who actually has a PhD. But anyway, that's kind of a cool book. So this is kind of an interesting thing about, you're talking about, shamans and cave paintings and things like that. We also live here in this area, in the area where, like, within a couple hours is the oldest hydroglyphic area in North America. So, and those are all the symbols, all the, the cymatic symbol, frequency symbols that are all carved on those rocks. And I think there's some DNA and ETs and different things like that. And then, I don't know if there's any petroglyphs up there, which are pictures of stories, right, that they tell. But
there's a few within the area. I wouldn't be surprised. Sorry, that's my kid throwing stuff.
Yeah, and so we also have the Red Giant here, where Sarah Winnemucca talks about how they got all the Paiute nations came together because the giants were eating their people, and when they couldn't steal the live people, they were digging up the dead people and eating them, and the Paiutes just couldn't do that anymore. They tried to communicate with the red-headed race, which were the giants. And they eventually, pushed them all into Lovelock Cave and burned the cave down and killed them all, because they couldn't. The Paiutes weren't going to do any cannibalism and didn't want to participate in cannibalism and desecration. So And so we have like kind of a really trippy ass area. We have a trippy ass area. So So one of the things I was taking, I was listening to this lecture from this guy in Ireland, and it was a long time ago on the internet. And so I can't even remember what the guy's name was, but I was going to talk about like what he talked about. And he said that, from a shamanism type perspective, that what he believes is that a lot of the paintings in caves and rocks, this guy, has studied a lot of this stuff, done his own like heavy spiritual work, done, medicines, dreamy medicines, and had come to these conclusions that the pictures were actually sigils, were magic, that people were better in tune with, or maybe that, their gods, their creator, taught them what to do to sort of like manifest what they needed when they needed it. When they couldn't be self-sustaining, there's points where you have to reach out to, get what's needed or what's taken care of, and new contracts and decisions and different kinds of things. And he said that he believes a lot of these, like if you see like a big, buffalo on the wall in the cave painted with a spear through it, that he said that was like a sigil, like it was a magical symbol, and they were telling on the cave what they needed to the creator so that the creator could provide it. And he said that he speculated that it almost could be like you go into the cave, you're like, your people need a buffalo, it's winter, it's cold, you're starving, you paint the buffalo and you put a spear through it, giving the creator the understanding of exactly what you need. We need a buffalo out here with a spear through it, which means that it's freshly killed so that, we can harvest it and use it to feed our people. And then they could literally go outside of the cave through their visualization also is creating this. And they could literally walk outside of the cave and there's the buffalo with the freshly, arrow through it laying there. So a lot of the native people that I've worked with, especially down like in New Mexico area, I remember talking to this Taos Pueblo elder, and he said that the way that they talk about the creator is that it's like a great computer in the sky. And so, it starts me to think about that maybe the creator is the original AI, and that there are specific ways that we work with it to, manifest our reality, but it also has to have the visualizations. I mean, when you do like, say, water work, like, a water, dance to create, bring water to your area. I've worked with rain altars that I've created through some self-study work. And what you have to do to think about that and visualize it in your own mind so that you can actually bring it about in real time, that this type of rainstorm comes in, and because you created it, what's the timeline? So these are all the things that you have to imagine while you're physically doing this stuff in order to bring it about, kind of a thing. And then there's also, the collective that has to be involved in that as well.
There's a lot of responsibility in it. Like, it has to be the initiative and the given right, I believe. And I think that the shaman is the person for it. And in some cultures, I took a course, what was it? Art is a Mirror of Evolving Consciousness with Leslie Coombs. And it referred to some of these cultures where if you weren't of that, of the training, right? If you didn't understand that ideology and you tried to make art, or if you tried to do the painting and manifest something, then you could be punished or put to death. But we've definitely lost sight of that, I think, these days and age, right? Like, we pretty much allow anybody to make anything, and we've disconnected from that. So there's a lot of room for manifesting all the chaos that makes a lot of sense to me in a lot of ways in terms of the collective trauma.
Yeah. And who else really talked about a lot of this stuff? I don't think in his books. I don't remember him talking about it in his books. Another person I just love to death is Eckhart Tolle. Yeah. But I remember a friend of mine was at sorry if I get this wrong, people, the Forlorn, the conscious community. I think it's like in Ireland or Scotland or someplace where it's a pretty amazing one. And he was lecturing there for, I don't know, he'd go there off and on, and then sometimes he'd stay for like a week, and he'd do several lectures, and I got kind of bootlegged. I used to also get all the Marianne Williamson, when she first started teaching A Course in Miracles in LA, and I used to get bootleg tapes from a friend of mine who was an actor down there. So I like knew about her like right from, you know, when she first kind of started. And it's kind of interesting, you know, to listen, you know, because I went through her process with her, you know, and it helped me, you know, with my process to evolve. So I think I have a greater understanding about her, who she is, you know, what she's trying to do. But Eckhart Tolle talks about in this one CD, this bootleg CD I got out of there, that about, you know, collective, and that one of the things that he thought about a lot was how, you know, like even with women and our periods, that throws us into this collective group. And that the reason why there's a lot of pain and suffering and trauma and lots of things surrounding women and their periods is because what's happened to women collectively. And that through that commonality of that biological function that we go through, we're slowly pressure valving, cleaning the collective around the whole thing.
Rebirthing, the sloughing off.
Yeah, of all the pain and suffering and everything else, you know, that's gone along with it. And so I think people get away from, you know, understanding that consciousness is also biological, you know, because it has to have the two, the spirit and the form, right?
We're tuners, right? Like frequencies or antennas, because if we're spirit and that's energy, then we're mostly water. You're talking about,
but if you have an antenna, like, you know, that you're putting out to, you know, for the energy part, what's it connected to? You've got to mount it on a house,
right?
You know, it's got to be like mounted and grounded, and somewhere you've got to attach it onto. It's got to be part of. So I think we forget a lot about the biological part and what our biological functions are dishing out in the world. That's what we're getting the response to, is the biological stuff that we're putting out in the world. So, you know, people will be like, well, you know, I really have been working on this conscious path and nothing's helping. And it's like, so what do you do? Well, I have my affirmations and my visualizations. And you're like, okay, well, what are you doing physically? Well, I don't know. And, you know, then you find out that they haven't tried to change their diet. They aren't actively, you know, cooking food with their whole self and their energy, you know, into it. They're not drinking cleaned up water. They're not, you know, they're not doing a lot of other things physically that they could do. Yeah. So there's not that balance, right, between both sides in the middle, the two sides coming into a unified way that you're standing in both of them. And this is kind of an interesting story, but I had this, I was in San Diego for, I don't know, like 8 months or something like that. And I ended up living kind of in this household that was like a small ashram that these people had studied with Yogi Bhajan, who brought Kundalini Yoga to America. You know, they had studied with him and had been doing this stuff for like 35 years. And they were connected to New Mexico and the ashram down there, and, you know, all of the people who live there, and blah, 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 blah. I ended up working part-time at this place called the Controversial Bookstore, which was kind of in the 60s, started out as like this anarchist, like underground movement, and then slowly turned into metaphysics, and then became an open to the public, like bookstore, and had been around since like the 60s. And so I was kind of lucky. I had to do a test, but I was their Saturday person. So people would come in and I'd do energetic healing on them or energetic readings and things like that and talk to people. And I had a few people who were really famous that actually would call into the store periodically and, you know what I mean, have a session with me, which was kind of a trip. It was a total trip, actually, the whole thing. But it attracted a lot of high-end conscious people, like big ones. And there was a man who was a Nibian priest who was like, you know, late 50s, who had, you know, doctorates and all kinds of theology and science of and history of spiritual and different types of religions, and was brilliant. And he came there to the bookstore because he heard about me, and he you know, sat down and talked to me about what was going on with him. And what had happened was that he had gotten prostate cancer, and he was really kind of in shock of it because as far as spiritually, he was doing everything perfectly, right? He didn't sleep anymore. He sat and meditated through the night. He, you know, was getting away from needing a lot of food. You know, he was reaching like his apex of spiritual consciousness in the energy fields. And so he couldn't figure out why he would get something like prostate cancer. So my work is all about bringing us out of the ethers to back to the earth as a spiritual process. You know, a ritual and worship by cultivating soil, healing the land, eating properly, you know, sleeping properly, like dealing with the biological end of manifestation and consciousness, right? Bringing them together. And so I actually helped him, did a lot of sessions, and we didn't do energy healing. What I did was I remapped him a diet and remapped him a protocol to start being able to go back to sleep and why he needed sleep. You know, our biological suit cleans and dumps itself in REM. So most people go into REM like 3 p.m. So our liver, gallbladder, a lot of these different types of systems, that's when our main computer program shuts off, and then the DOS, the background programming kicks on. And then it starts to manage our biological body. And so I had to explain a lot of this stuff to him that blew him away because, you know, this is just stuff that is, you know, wasn't in any of his learnings, that he might have to actually take personal responsibility for his physical body, and that he needed to go back and actually be nice to it and be kind to it and not push it to these limits, if he wanted to continue to survive and live in the suit. I mean, there's always a choice. Do you want to pass out of this world, or do you want to stay here and still keep being here and being part of it? So we actually changed his diet, took a while, and then he started to try to get back on sleeping. And it took several years before he could, you know, sleep at least, you know, 5 or 6 hours and go into a REM. And he really changed his diet. And what he did is he found more spiritual happiness with going back to having a diet and actually eating food, instead of that the spiritual process was to eliminate it. And so he actually became happier and healthier, and he ended up getting over his prostate cancer without doctors or anything else, just because he changed the needs of the body. That, you know, that the body has to be brought into consideration as part of. I mean, think about, like, if you're like attracts like, if that's the reality that people are living in here, and you decide that you're going to deprive your body of food. Now, deprivation, or, you know, you're depriving. So what do you think you're going to get in return? You're going to get a lot of jobs that deprive you. Your health might deprive you. Your family might deprive you. You know, these are all these things that you're sending out a signal into the reality. And if you believe like attracts like, then you're going to get that depravity back and multiple scales in your life. Kind of a thing. I know that's hard to understand, but it's true. What you do to your body is what you do to yourself, and what you do to your environment, and what you do to your spirit, and what will energetically go out and check and manifest that reality back to you.
Right. It's important to work through your own shit.
It is, and it's important. I had a friend of mine was a cowgirl. We were really good friends for years, and so she had that, cowgirl languaging, and she always would say to me, Bridgette, you don't want to get involved with other people's shit because some might splash on you. And it's so true because, you step in piles of poop with horses and animals and, you get it all over your shoes and you're cleaning pens and, you take that to another avenue of energetically, like, am I stepping in somebody else's, energy shit and splashing it back onto me? Don't I have enough? Shouldn't I stay, in my own reality and work with the things that I need to take care of,
Right. And taking responsibility for your own shit and like all the personal responsibility. And even in the language and me saying, I need to take responsibility for my shit and and doing so in such a way that inspires other people to do so for themselves so that it's not enabling. It's challenging. And that's where these boundaries come into play. Like where you get kids and then understanding what behavior is and what maintains that attention, right? And what feeds it.
Right. Well, but think about it. Like, if there's a like attract thing and the kid is trying to display, like it's hungry and it's in a lack because it needs something to eat. So it's going to have behavior. And if we don't take care of that right away, then we're going to have, lack in some area of life because we're ignoring the lack or the need, right? But then we also have to do it from the observer end where we're not totally, enmeshed in it emotionally, like, oh, that poor little kid is starving. And, there was a period of my life where my family was starving and, instead of people getting stuck in all that stuff, it's like, well, then go down to the store and get that kid some food. Instead of, rolling around in your stuff, taking you back into the past and feeding all that energy, action-wise, you could actually step up to the plate and feed them. Maybe you need to eat lunch too. Maybe take them to lunch.
Right. And then there's taken into consideration too, I think, with people where that empathy thing comes back into and the limitations, right? And the different things and the access to and those resources. And so when it comes to self-healing and bringing those resources in, like knowing what's enough and how much is too much and knowing what one should deserve over another, like the self-worth coming into play too, because I think as much as people are capable of destroying systems outside of themselves, they internalize it. And you and I talked a little bit too about depression, right? And the prevalence of depression, and here in our area, how much depression there is, and the high rates of suicide and the high rates of substance abuse. And it's the norm. People don't question it.
Well, that's why, there's a lot of physical reasons why we have the largest homeless population in the nation per capita here. But the energetic ones, which we could call the feeling ones, right, are the depression. People here for 40 years, Nevada just went up and up and up and up. We never had economic dips. People thrived here, barely worked and made tons of money, had really good lifestyles. And then, since 2008, like the whole bottom has completely dropped out. And so people are freaked out here. Like they can't go, have the house they want to have and have all this other stuff and can't continue to do partying like superstars because, there's just money flowing from all directions. Money, you could make money hand over fist. And so now you're starting to see the depression end of all that, right? The feeling part, the mental part, and then actually what it's actually conjuring and bringing more to this area.
Right. Like
physically
rates have more than doubled, and like the population has grown to like 500,000 within this area within like the last 5 years or so. And there's the cultural influx of people from all over America and some people from different places around the world, but they're coming in different waves. there's a lot of Californians who've had a big prevalence on the the energy and things like that here too. But
yeah, but the thing is that's sad about all of it is the garbage that is in the river, all along the river. I mean, we're talking heavy amounts of garbage. There's garbage everywhere. So with the influx of all these different people, there is a huge amount of physical damage that's been done to the whole area. I mean, it used to be like a really beautiful place to be, the Reno area had been, for years and years and years. And within the last 5 years, it looks like California. It looks like places in California where there's, garbage all over the place, so like, people say, oh, well, with the Californian people, there's a lot more consciousness and grassroots things and all these other things that are moving in with it. But there's also a lot of negative stuff that's moving in with it, like totally destroying the area, which I think is really kind of interesting because, California is like, nobody wants to live in California because of, all of the things that is bad about California. And a lot of it has to do with a lot of the culture, the down and out culture.
Quote unquote, and the lights going out and just, even from Southern California to Northern California, there's like the divide, right?
Yeah, huge divide.
There's a huge divide.
That's why, you always have Northern California. Okay, so you have the Jefferson State, which is the 51st state, people. It was adopted in 1944, and it's the very top part of California, and where it borders over into Oregon, part of that, and also the corner of Nevada. And and the reason why it became the Jefferson State was that the government and states were unwilling to actually create infrastructure in those areas. There was a lot of rugged mountain terrain, and so the people that moved in there basically were isolated and completely left alone. And so what they did was they formed the Jefferson State in 1944. You can go look it up. And so it's still running and operating today, and they do things a lot differently. Well, there's a point in Northern California where they're trying to bring at least the Grass Valley, Nevada City, a lot of those areas to be formally part of the Jefferson State. And a lot of the money comes out of Northern California that pays all the welfare bills in Southern California. Southern California wouldn't have the welfare state that they have if it wasn't for Northern California. They have logging. They started out with the weed industry. There's a lot of industries that people in Northern California had to create in order to have an economy and be able to live sustainably, in rugged areas where there's not a lot of stores, not a lot of other things. They're kind of on their own. So there's always been this thing where Northern California wants to legally completely separate from Southern California. There was a lot of talk for a period of time where there was a line drawn through it, California, and part was going to be Northern and part was going to be Southern. But internationally, a lot of countries were pissed. The UN was pissed, all these other people, because at that time, California was the 7th largest economy in the world. So it was functioning kind of as its own country. So they didn't want to split it up because then Southern California would have gone down, the tubes. Big time would have been, super bad. So now you've got, part of Northern California that is actually, doing an extension to the Jefferson State and actually, fighting their way through California legislature, to get that done. So, yeah.
Then you've got the Latino population, too, underneath all of that, because there's that on top of the separation between the white takeover over, the native tribes, not only of California, but of the southern half, too, like out of Mexico. And there's just so much, again, of that like cultural lineage, the toxicity that carries through and underlies the area.
Yeah, and the overlapping. I think the overlapping is probably worse because a lot of these people who may have had cultural once they were moved into the United States, a lot of their cultural stuff was abandoned. And because of poverty, I think it's made, other negative conditions for, the overlapping of all of it. But yeah, it's super crazy. It's super crazy, what's going on in California and how that is applying, up to our area. Because, Nevada borders pretty much all of California up and down.
Yeah.
And so as these fires displace people and they don't have homes, if they investigate your property or it's a fire, they're not going to let you live on it in a tent. So people have to go live somewhere else, and then they don't get their money out of their land or whatever else. They can't rebuild it, and they're stuck. So we see a huge influx of people from fire-related areas, like in droves running to Nevada, and they're living in cars or living in RVs. They're living in whatever they can on the side of the road, and there isn't enough jobs here to support a lot of them. I know some of them that had medical stuff have integrated, into our hospitals and stuff like that, but for the most part, a lot of these people would have lost their jobs. I mean, my friend Elizabeth from the Paradise Fire, she woke up. I have several friends that were in the Paradise Fire, and basically they woke up in the morning and they looked outside and the flames were super high, and they literally had to flee and run through and drive through these flames. Some people were shot out of their cars because the ground was so hot that by the time they got into the car to flee with their bare feet, their animals, and not even their purse or anything else, and they went to drive, and then they got near the flames, that the gas got so hot that literally blew people out of their cars.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, and she, her whole town, she was up in the Concau area, which is a little bit above Paradise, but her son was down in Paradise. Everything's on fire. She doesn't even know if her son's okay. Trying to find out where he's at. He's in high school. And then she had her 4 dogs and fled in her bigger vehicle. And when she went back, there was nothing left. Her car, nothing was left. The building wasn't left. Nothing. Yeah. And so they didn't have a bank. They didn't have a school. They didn't have, a medical place. They have nothing in Paradise left. So you don't have, she had a practice. She did massage on people. She was super busy, and all gone. And so what do you do? So they're fleeing with nothing. And these are middle class. These are the middle class. So literally, basically a large amount of the middle class, from the very, look at the fires going on right now in San Diego area. What, 3,500 houses have been burned down?
It's ridiculous. And then, I don't know, they can't contact people. They keep fleeing, and then they keep coming this direction, and they keep coming back into Nevada, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah, because we don't have resources for people here.
No, we're a desert. We're a high desert up in the mountains, and when the paths close off to California, the snow gets really deep,
Yeah, it can. It can get, pretty, yeah. And I don't know, it's sad because, I was helping a lot with the Food Not Bombs for a couple of winters, and trying to get them stuff that they need. And it just shocks me how they have nothing. A lot of them are not prepared. And eventually they lose their RVs and their cars because they can't afford to get them fixed. They can't afford to put gas in them. So we get a lot of abandoned cars here, and it takes months for the police to even pay attention to all the abandoned cars everywhere and tag them and then get them removed, and RVs and just all kinds of stuff that you see just kind of laying around as a result of people finally losing everything and then under the bridge, and might have a blanket to survive 7 degrees at night.
We were talking about Burning Man, too, and the amount of people that come in from there and the amount of resources that it takes to spend the week out in the desert. It's a lot. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of distance. And
yeah, well, there's a cult. So when I was when I was younger, we used to all go to the Grateful Dead, even though I was responsible and the people I was with were responsible. We all had jobs and stuff, but we would go for like 3 or 4 days. In Sacramento, the Grateful Dead would go around and we'd just do the dead thing. And it was a culture. There were a lot of people that traveled around the United States with the dead, like caravanning to where they're going to head next. And they didn't really have anything. They just had what was in their car. And whatever else, but they would make things or sell things, different kinds of pot-related things, brownies and cookies and burritos after everybody would get out, and just lots of different kinds of things, homebrew. And so they would have this huge area set up. So you went before and you could get all kinds of different drugs and whatever else and party. And so it was kind of like a big, open market. And what's interesting is that there is this kind of more modern, maybe younger generation that is doing this with Burning Man. And so what happens is a lot of them, I'm going to call them the granolas, I'm not trying to generalize, and a lot of them who I call kind of like the down and out society, part of our society, because they kind of are, for whatever reason, this is the road that they've taken. And so I was in Grass Valley and I was hanging out with some of my native friends there, and they took me up to this really beautiful part of the Yuba River because it's super hot. And we went swimming and, we smoked doobies. It was super great. And we just had this beautiful day, but there were all these people, these granola people, and this Burning Man culture that were there. And they were saying like they actually camp out for like a month up in that area, in areas where you're not supposed to camp at all. These are like areas where there is no actual real camping, so there's no places for them to take a poop, there's no places for them to dump their garbage, and they live in these kind of like communal settings as they're migrating towards Burning Man, for the Burning Man.
It's interesting because a lot of the artwork and the scale and the pyrotechnics, a lot of it is fantastic. It's phenomenal. And the structure and the engineering that goes into it, it's worth seeing to a degree. And it's neat that it's available outside of the Burning Man camp. But at the same time, it's just when it's playing into this larger scheme and there's all this unconsciousness playing into the energetics and into the alchemy, into the soup mix.
Well, the environment, they've destroyed a very old, ancient environment. And, they try to call themselves green, but Burning Man has created an environmental disaster.
They try, but it's tough. You get cross-pollination of various cultures.
Well, but the thing is
for various reasons, and they just... Yeah. Unleash their toxins.
Well, but the fact that they go there and all these cars that park there and all these things that they have that have chemicals and they build and they burn and all the other stuff that goes along with it has contaminated all of the dirt. And so basically they've taken off all the topsoil because they stay for like 2 or 3 months to pick up every little thing out of the dirt, but that dirt gets thrown away. That dirt is what these plants, grew in. And without that, topsoil, top environment, you could call it a desert, but it still has an ecosystem that relies on the soil.
The migration from Reno to the Black Rock Desert alone, it's bringing all of that back.
Oh, and the thing that horrified me when I was out, nowadays, I forget where I was up. I was up in Oregon, like doing some work on some land for some people, and I ended up coming through on the exact day where a lot of people were leaving the Burning Man. So I came through the Gerlach, Cedarville, came down through and got stuck in some of it. And when I hit Nixon, I was so unbelievably shocked that the native people, the reason why they're charging people so much money to dump their garbage is because these people were coming through their reservation and just throwing it out on the side of the road. I mean, the amount of garbage that comes out of Burning Man is, you can't even wrap your mind around it.
third largest city in Nevada for a disposable.
Yeah, 100% disposable. Oh, we're at the end of the show.
Already.
Hey,
it's been lovely. We get to talk next week on my show too, right?
Yep. I'm doing your show next week. So anyway, it's been the Wednesday edition. Kelsey Sweet was on my show. I'll be on her show next Wednesday. And we're coming into the end of the show. You're listening to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. And I'm going to see you guys again on Saturday. I'm your host, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. And we really need your donations now more than any time ever in the history of Revolution Radio. And you can go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and support us in whatever possible ways that you can support us. And we would be super appreciative. And Adam Painter, he is offering his free ebook for that, so put that in the message if you are donating $10 or more. All right, everybody, Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.